What if the deadliest maritime disaster in history was entirely preventable? On April 10, 1912, the largest moving object on Earth set sail. Over 2,200 souls boarded a vessel carrying humanity's greatest pride. But what they didn't know, the ship's fate was already being written. The ship had 16 watertight compartments, but only 4 could flood safely. The iceberg warning arrived at 9 a.m. Nobody told the captain. That single ignored message would cost over 1,500 lives by midnight. Captain Edward Smith was on his retirement voyage, his very last command. He was beloved, celebrated, and dangerously overconfident about modern shipbuilding. Something was already wrong, before the Titanic even left the harbor. Officers knew about the fire. The decision was made to sail anyway. The fire had weakened the hull exactly where the iceberg would strike. What if the warnings had been taken seriously from the very beginning? The wireless operators were overwhelmed. Passenger messages took full priority. The most critical warning was from SS Mesaba. It was never delivered. At 11 p.m., SS Californian warned of a massive ice field directly ahead. But what they didn't know, the Californian's operator shut down for the night. Meanwhile, first-class passengers drank champagne completely unaware of the danger. Third-class passengers slept in the ship's lowest decks, completely sealed below. No one realized what would happen next, but the ocean already knew. A calm sea meant no waves breaking at the base of icebergs invisible. Lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee had no binoculars in the crow's nest. What if the binoculars had simply been placed in the right storage locker? Officer David Blair was replaced at the last minute and accidentally took the key. One small brass key. One catastrophic chain reaction. J. Bruce Ismay, White Star Line chairman, was aboard pushing the captain for speed. What if the captain had simply said no? The engines were pushed to full ahead maximum speed into a known ice field. At 22.5 knots, the world's largest ship was racing blindly through frozen darkness. Something was already wrong, deep inside the ship's decision-making chain. He had wanted more watertight compartments built higher but was overruled for luxury space. Comfort sold tickets. Safety cost money. The Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for barely half the passengers. But what they didn't know, regulations hadn't been updated since 1894. A lifeboat drill had been scheduled for that Sunday morning, then cancelled. Nobody knew which lifeboat to go to. Nobody had practiced lowering a single one. Even the crew had never practiced an emergency evacuation at full capacity. April 14, 1912, the final day. Everything still felt perfect. What if someone had simply looked at the thermometer that night? Officer Murdoch was on watch. The bridge was quiet. The ocean was silent. No one realized what would happen next, until the bell rang 3 times. Fleet grabbed the phone. The order, hard A starboard. The helmsman spun the wheel hard. The ship began too slowly to turn. 37 seconds. That was all the time between warning and destruction. What if Murdoch had done nothing, just hit it head-on? The turning ship scraped 300 feet of underwater ice along the hull. Above deck, passengers barely noticed a slight shudder. Below decks, seawater was already flooding in at terrifying speed. Thomas Andrews calculated the truth. The ship had 90 minutes. But what they didn't know, the weakened hull gave way faster. 5 compartments flooded. The design only allowed 4. Captain Smith finally gave the order, uncover the lifeboats. Many passengers refused to board. The ship felt safer. Lifeboat 7 left with only 28 people. Capacity, 65. No one realized what would happen next, until the orchestra started playing. The SS Californian sat just 10 miles away, lights clearly visible. Rockets were fired from Titanic's deck for 90 minutes. The Californian's crew saw the rockets and went back to sleep. At 2:17 a.m., the ship broke apart. People screamed. 1,500 people entered 28 degrees Fahrenheit water. Survival time, 15 minutes. What if just one lifeboat had turned back immediately? Only lifeboat 14 returned. They saved just 13 more people. By 2:20 a.m., the unsinkable ship had vanished beneath the Atlantic. The RMS Carpathia raced 4 hours to arrive. They pulled 710 survivors from the lifeboats. 1,517 people died. The deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in history. When news reached New York, the world fell silent in disbelief. But what they didn't know, the blame had only begun. Ismay would spend the rest of his life in disgrace. Captain Smith went down with his ship. Thomas Andrews was last seen alone, staring at a painting. The ship settled 12,500 feet to the ocean floor. What if the Titanic disaster was not just an accident? The Olympic had been badly damaged in an earlier collision. Some claimed the two ships had been switched. But what they didn't know. J.P. Morgan cancelled his ticket before sailing. Dozens of wealthy passengers also cancelled days before. Milton Hershey also cancelled at the last moment. What if the owners needed the ship to sink? 3 of America's wealthiest men all perished that night. The Federal Reserve Act passed 14 months later. Something was already wrong, even in the investigation that followed. Negligence was found but nobody was prosecuted. The coal fire evidence was barely mentioned. In 1985, Robert Ball 5 Lard found the wreck. The hull showed strange buckling beyond simple ice damage. The rivets were found to be dangerously weak. What if the Titanic story isn't really about an iceberg at all? The Titanic didn't sink because of ice alone but human arrogance. What if the greatest lesson of the Titanic is one we still haven't learned?